rebounding. Got to get it in. Does to Smith. Jabari for three and the win. Yeah!
We are here to fuel your Rockets news. It's the Rockets Fuel podcast, and I'm your co-host, Lachard Binkley. Of course, you can always find me on Twitter at Binkley Hoops, and you can find my written work at SB Nation, the main site, or the Dream Shake. So make sure you check out all my content there. Before we get too far into it, and we're gonna let our special guest introduce himself, I'm gonna let my co-host give everybody his information where they can find all his great content.
All right, it's Vator. You can find me at Vator H-Town on Twitter and also IG.
All right, and y'all, this is a familiar face to Rocket Fuel, but of course I want to also give him a chance to let everybody know where they can find him, because he's pretty much everywhere. Pretty much every sport you can think of, he's pretty much covering at this point.
Yeah, so it's Brandon Scott. I'm at Sports Radio 610, doing a little bit of hosting, supervising their digital operation, podcasting, pretty much anything you can think of. Texans, Rockets, Astros, all of that. So, Sports Radio 610. Also doing some, like I said, Rockets podcasting, and a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So, I appreciate y'all having me, man. This is a really good space to be in, and obviously to talk about the Rockets. Y'all do a hell of a job doing so. So, I'm honored to be here, man.
Man, we definitely appreciate that. Well, like I said, I've had you on before. We had a great conversation. It's been a while since you've been on. I think it was like earlier in the season, but I definitely want to have you back on, because you're doing big things. Every time I look up, you're at Texans events, you're at Rockets events, you're at Astros events. So you're pretty much everywhere these days.
Yeah, I mean, that's the name of the game, is to be in the mix. You know what I mean? Yeah. You want to try to be seen and be available. And that to me, like, if anybody like is trying to get in this business and grind, like the thing to do is to just be available. And that's I feel like working hard and being available is the best thing that I can do. And then the talent speaks for itself after that. So that's what I would tell people to do, man. Always, as best you can. Life comes and gets in the way sometimes, but as best you can, be available and be willing. And I appreciate Sports Radio 610 at the very least giving me the opportunity to do some of those things.
Absolutely, man. That's great advice. In the culture we're in now, where everything's kind of a hot take, or trying to get your name out there by shock value, it's about grinding out, being available, working hard, getting your name out there in the right way, because eventually it'll work its way back to you in a positive way. So yeah, man, that's great advice on that.
I'll add just to Lachard, man, not to cut you off, but I would say like a legitimate passion for the content. Yeah. That's the thing that I sense from y'all. The reason why I ride with y'all is like, y'all are informed and knowledgeable and all of that, but you're also like super passionate about what you do, and that comes off like through the social media, through the podcast, and that's what I try to be about as well. So like, you find that thing that you're passionate about, like you're gonna want to put that work in. And I'm passionate about the Rockets, right? I'm passionate about the Astros and the Texans and the city in general, the community in general, right? So like, it's kind of easy for me to lean into it and pour into it the way that I do, man.
I'm glad you said that, man, because I get a lot of flack on social media because like people say, like I'm just saying stuff. Like I mean, you may not agree with what I say, but like I actually like believe if I post it, like I believe, like you can disagree with it, but at the end of the day, I'm a fan, and so I'm allowed to have an opinion, and so the fact that like you said that just like makes me feel like it's like a confirmation. Because, people are always like, oh, you just saying stuff so you can get like interactions. And I'm like, I believe this. Like, you might disagree with it, and that's fine. But like, I'm just one of those people that I'm not afraid to like post my opinion. And then like, I'm not afraid to defend my opinion. So anyway, thanks, Brandon, for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Like y'all was saying, just kind of tie it up. I mean, even before I got into actually covering the team, I've been a lifelong Rockets fan. So much as you try to be professional a lot of times, I mean, it's going to come through. I've been following the Rockets for a long time. I mean, I'm in my 40s now. Like, I think we're all kind of similar in age. So, I mean, I've been following the Rockets for a long time, been a fan a long time. So that's going to come through regardless of how much I try to be professional, even, being at the games now. But, we definitely appreciate that. And we can definitely feel that passion, coming from you. And that's why we wanted to have you on, and definitely talking about the upcoming draft that's definitely going to be the biggest story for the Rockets. I mean, we still have the playoffs going on, which we're going to talk a little bit about later in the show. But right now, the biggest thing in the Houston Rockets community is the draft lottery that's coming up next week. And that's kind of where I wanted to start. I mean, we kind of know who's going to be the top 3 picks. Some people have 2 and 3 in a different order. They may have Brandon Miller at 2 and Scoot Henderson at 3. But we kind of know who's going to be the top 3 at this point. What I really want to talk about is, what do the Rockets do if they fall outside of the top 3? I think that's kind of a worst case scenario, because even though there are some really good players after the top 3, that's when it starts getting a little bit dicey as far as projecting them out to be superstar level players. So, Brandon, I want to start with you. If you're the Rockets and you fall, let's say, to 4 or 5, somewhere in that range, are you thinking about, okay, we're trying to win this year, I may package this and try to go out and get a disgruntled starters out there like a Jaylen Brown, or try to go get a Mikal Bridges, or just some similar names like that may be out there that teams may be looking to move on from? Or would you still keep that pick and go with one of the Thompson twins, or go with Cam Whitmore, or go with one of those type of players?
Yeah, man, I definitely am thinking about it, and I think so. There's a couple of it's kind of a 2-part question here. Like, what would you do? What would we do? And maybe what do we think they might do? And there's probably a little bit of a difference there, I think. But I feel pretty confident that if they fall outside of the top 3, that they would be more interested in trading out of it. That's what I think that they would do. So let's just put that part aside. What I would do, if you're asking my opinion, I actually would be sort of interested in one of the Thompson twins, mainly the one that's more of a point guard. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correct, but is the twin that I think I would be more interested in, and even a Black. I'm interested in the point, like, where do they fall and what are they targeting? What are they interested in around that spot? I do think that there's a player that they could get there. So if it were me, I would be less inclined to do so. It's obviously something that I would think about, and you'd have to gauge who's available. Is Jaylen Brown as disgruntled as the rumors indicate? Like, what all are you willing to give up for a rental, and like, what's the plan there, like, past that? Because he's talked about wanting to explore free agency and all of that. Like, what exactly is the strategy there? But I would definitely be interested in the possibility of adding one of these point guards, because I would agree with the initial point that you made. After top 3, it's really hard projecting like a franchise type of player in this draft. I don't really think that that's there, but I do think you could get a solid piece in a point guard, say around 4 or 5, if that's where you end up at. So I would be more interested in that myself.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's a lot of different possibilities, and I do agree with you as far as the Rockets, because we heard Rafael Stone say that they'll be willing to trade anything, except we know they're not trading a number 1 pick. And nobody's trading number 1 pick under any circumstances. They're not trading a number 1 pick, but I mean, there's definitely a lot of different possibilities. So, I mean, Vader, what's kind of your opinion? What do you think they would do, and what would you personally do if you had that decision?
I mean, obviously, I think it just kind of depends on like what is available. Like, if you can get Jaylen Brown, like, I know we've had a lot of like back and forth discourse in the community about like the value of Jaylen Brown. I mean, the guy just made a 2nd team All NBA team. Yes, he is a flawed player, but he does do a lot of really good things, and he would absolutely make the Rockets better. If you can somehow package a 4 or 5 pick, 6 pick, and get Jaylen Brown, I mean, I don't see how you turn that down. As long as the price is not like something that is like gonna set your franchise back, I think that you have to make that trade. Like, that is a trade that makes you better, right? So it just kind of depends on what's on the table. Now, if it's just some kind of like fringe guy, then no. Like, I think you keep that pick, because there are some guys who have some upside in this draft. I mean, yeah, you got to wait for it, but like, I know some people may or may not be high on Jarace Walker. Jarace Walker is a guy who, he's not a flashy player, but he's a guy who's going to be able to come in and be like a tremendous defender. He can defend probably all 5 positions. Like, he has a like Lou Dort, like a giant sized Lou Dort ability to play defense. And so like that is a guy who I feel like Ime Udoka would be like he'd be able to deploy that guy with like Tyrese and Jabari Smith Jr., guys like that, and you really have a formidable like defensive lineup on the floor. And we haven't seen that very much over the past couple years. So like I like Jarris Walker, maybe not at 4, but like Brandon was saying, like Amin Thompson is very intriguing to me. Like to me, he's a walking paint touch, and by that I mean like who's keeping that guy out of the paint? Like I know his jump shot is broken. I mean, it's hard to project that he's ever going to be like a legitimate like outside shooter one day. But one thing I know he can do, just from seeing like before Ben Simmons fell off a cliff, even though Ben Simmons couldn't shoot, he could get in the paint and he could create opportunities for other guys. Russell Westbrook, even though his shooting wanes at times, he's able to get in the paint and he can create opportunities for other guys. I think Amin Thompson is instantly going to come into the NBA and be that type of player as far as like just from a creation standpoint. His court vision is really good, and like as far as like being an athlete, I think he's in the top 1%. Like there's not like when I look at his athleticism, I just don't think that there are many guys in the NBA who can rival him athletically. Like I think he automatically comes in and he's like to me, and people may disagree, but and I always say this. Like I love Jalen Green, and Jalen Green is like probably one of the most athletic players in the NBA. I think Amin Thompson is a better athlete than Jalen Green, which is crazy. Which is crazy when you think about it. So you're talking about a guy who has elite athleticism, like probably surpass elite. We're talking like S tier. Like he is like up here as far as being an athlete. And then you're talking about a guy who has really good court vision, who's going to be able to get in the paint and create opportunities. I think maybe at 4 you look at a Jarris Walker or Amin Thompson. But if you can get a Jaylen Brown, I mean, obviously you're going to explore that. Like he made second team All NBA this season. Like that guy, that is an All NBA player. He's good. So just long story short, basically it just kind of depends on what's on the table. Like to me, if you can get something better for that pick, you have to explore it. You have to make it known like, hey, this pick is available, but we're not giving it away, right? And so. Other than that, though, I think there are still some guys on the board at 4 or 5, and I do like Anthony Black as well. I don't know if I like him at that high of a pick. I wish that we could somehow do what like the Detroit Pistons did last year. They were able to move up and they were able to get Jaden Ivey and they were able to get
both,
Jalen Duren. And I know that's not easy to do.
Right.
But sometimes if there's a guy that you've identified and you like him, we saw the Texans do that. Like they identified that and people disagree with it, right? Like some people, well, not everybody, but some people disagree with the fact that they drafted CJ Stroud number 2, and then they gave up a lot of assets to move up to number 3 to pick Will Anderson. But on their board, they identify like, hey, if we get these 2 guys, I think that we'll be in a better position for our franchise moving forward. So like for me, like I think the Rockets, if they are able to like move up from that 20 position with that pick, and move back into the lottery and like snag another guy, that would be to me like that would be like a best case scenario. Like if you can move up and get like a guy like Anthony Black.
Could I add though? I feel like it also depends on, and I think we know the answer to this part. How quickly are they trying to get good again? And I think we all would agree that is. We are at the point now after the last 3 years that we've experienced that they're at like, hey, way sooner rather than later. So in the scenario where they fall out of the top 3, kind of going back to the point. Okay, so once you fall out of the top 3, what option, again, depending on what's available, what option makes you better sooner? Drafting Amin Thompson or like finding one of the options that we just mentioned, or trying to package that for Jaylen Brown. And that's why I feel like that's what they would lean toward, like almost as a consolation prize for not being able to get Victor Wembanyama or not being able to get Scoot Henderson. We say, 'cause the types of players that you feel like even as rookies are the types of players that change your trajectory as a team, short-term and long-term. Okay, I can't get that type of player. So now what do I do? And those other guys that we're talking about probably don't do that for you. Or are far less likely to do that for you than to use that to go package and get Jaylen Brown if that's an option.
And if you bring James Harden back, he's obviously probably going to want like a veteran to come in with him. So I think that kind of changes too. Like, unfortunately, and I know a lot of people are completely against James Harden coming back in general. And then also, if James Harden comes back and then you're moving like some of your assets to bring in veteran players, they don't like that idea either. But I mean, like, if we're being realistic, like if James Harden does indeed come back, like, and that pick falls to 4, I think it's for sale, because James Harden is probably gonna want another veteran dude alongside with him to pair with him.
It's like LeBron James when he came back to Cleveland and they had the number 1 pick. They ended up trading it for Kevin Love. They didn't go and draft Wiggins. They ended up trading him to Minnesota so that they could bring over Kevin Love, because LeBron James didn't want to play with a number 1 pick. He didn't want to have to go through the process of trying to get them up to speed, and he was trying to win a championship. And I think that's the same thing that happened with James Harden. Like you said, they would probably package that pick if it's outside the top 3, because if James Harden is coming back, more than likely it's probably a shorter term deal than he probably would like, because I just don't see the Rockets giving him a 4-year deal. Even a 3-year deal seems kind of, too long of a period for a person that's already approaching 34, 35 years old. So that would definitely be something that they would look for. They would look to probably try to trade and bring in somebody else. Before we move on to the next topic, I want to ask both of y'all. Y'all were kind of speaking about, the possibility of trading that pick. Is there anybody on the team that you would not trade to, that you would not attach to that pick to bring over a player like a Jaylen Brown? Or, to me, I guess it would have to be a star level player or higher. You're not going to probably bring him over for some, player that's like even though Fred VanVleet's a free agent, that level player. You're looking for somebody that can probably eventually become a superstar. So is there anybody that you wouldn't trade on the Rockets attached to that pick? And I'll start with you, Brandon.
Yeah, so for me, I struggle with trading any of the core guys for Jaylen Brown. Like, look, so let's just start off by making this point. Right now, as we sit here and as we speak, Jaylen Brown is a better player than anybody that the Rockets could offer. Okay, so today, but the issue with so let's just throw Jalen Green's name out there. The issue with that is, man, Jalen Green and what he projects to be is just, and still not knowing, after year 2, still not having necessarily a good beat on, hey, is he gonna get there? You can see it, you can clearly see where it's there. It's like, man, do I want to trade away that potential of, hey, could this be the best or second best player on the championship team for a guy who I know can be the second best player on a team that went to the finals? Yeah. Like, what is my risk versus reward, and what's my appetite for risk there? I struggle with. I'll say this, like, so, I obviously qualified it right there. I mean, he's a better player right now. But do you want to do that? My hesitation is on trading any of these core guys for Jaylen Brown is just like, he wants to test free agency, once he becomes a free agent. Would you want to sacrifice one of your core young pieces for a potential rental? And you would want to maybe have some assurances if you were to bring him in, but you could never know. Or would you be willing to wait? I mean, you have money now, you're going to have money then. So would you be willing to wait on perhaps enticing Jaylen Brown in free agency as opposed to giving up an essential asset like one of these guys? That is where I struggle with it. Player value standpoint, like, I could totally see it and understand it. I'm personally hesitant to do it because I feel like there are better ways to go about it. And especially if that pick falls out of the top 3. I mean, now you're really talking about a different kind of situation there. So I'm hesitant to do so. I would lean towards no, even though I would understand how it would make sense.
And what about you, Vader?
Jaylen Brown, I have some untouchables. Let's say Luka Doncic suddenly said, "Hey, I want out of Dallas. Y'all are terrible. I hate it here. The city is not this. I don't like this city. The Cowboys play here. Stuff like that." If Luka Doncic requests out of Dallas, my untouchable list probably goes down to 0, and that's with me saying that I really love a lot of guys on this roster. Like, to me. I don't trade Jalen Green because I like Brandon was saying, I think that Jalen Green projects to be at least a player similar to Jaylen Brown. I think that he has shown that he can probably be a better ball handler and better at facilitating. Like those are the two things that Jaylen Brown struggles with, kind of. And I think that we saw enough like development from Jalen Green and his set. Like he wasn't supposed to be able to ISO and create his own shot and get his own buckets like that. Like what we saw him doing this past season. He had, and he wasn't supposed to be able to like create, opportunities for other guys. And we saw him have some really good assist games this year too, where he just like was getting to his free throw rate was like pretty insane for a second year guard. So like I just see a lot of stuff with Jalen Green where I'm not comfortable like including him in the package necessarily. And then as far as especially depending on what else you give up, and then you also have to consider like Jalen Green is going to be signed to what like a almost a $300 million contract. So I don't know. It's just a lot of things you have to take into consideration. So I don't know if I trade Jalen. I wasn't as high on Jabari as a lot of people at the beginning of the year, but I saw towards the end of the season some things that I did not expect to see from him as far as him like operating at the elbow, him being able to get in that short corner and in the low post, like some of the stuff that he did this season, even creating his own shot. Like I know he doesn't necessarily like have this extensive dribble package. I mean, he doesn't, let's just be honest, but I saw him create his own shot well enough to like take a couple dribbles, make a move, and just raise up and shoot over people. And when you're talking about a dude that's 6'10", 6'11" with his body type, like that's all he really needs to be able to do. And so like he's a guy who I'd hesitate to trade. Alperen Şengün is controversial in the community just because like you don't know like if he is going to be what maybe he can be offensively, then you do what you have to do to build a team around him to cover for his weaknesses. But he does have some weaknesses on the defensive end. And you see like a team like Denver, and like he's not on Jokic's level, obviously. But they established that like he was able to be like this force offensively to where, hey, we got to make this work. Like this guy is so good that we have to make it work. Şengün's not there yet, but if he ever reaches a point where you like, man, I feel like he's worth it. Like we have to draft or bring in guys through free agency or trade that we can put around Şengün to make this work. Then like he's a guy who I hesitate to trade. I don't know if he's untouchable for me, but I hesitate to trade him because I do honestly think that he's going to be better than Sabonis over in Sacramento. Just because I watched Sabonis in the playoffs this season and I saw like a guy who you can't dump Sabonis the ball and create offense like you can dump the ball to Şengün. Like he's good at the high post and like with dudes cutting and stuff like that. But Şengün is a guy who like if you don't come double Şengün is going to score on you.
Yeah, you can run the offense through him.
Yeah, you can run the offense. You can legitimately. And Sabonis, they ran the offense through him. But like when I really like sat down and I dissected and watched the games like I did this playoffs, I saw that he has some weaknesses to his game that Şengün doesn't necessarily even have at 20 years old. Like he is better at Şengün in some things, but I think those are things that Şengün can work on. So like I hesitate to trade Şengün too. But like I said, like it just depends on who's available. But for me, those are the three guys that I really would like to keep. I think Tari Eason has some like potential there just because he's a dog and he just kind of does pretty much everything on the court. But outside of that, like to me, like you have to do what you have to do in order. I hate to take the Daryl Morey asset approach, but I mean, at the end of the day, like what is your ultimate goal? Your ultimate goal is to win. And so sometimes you have to make a tough decision, and that means, a lot of guys on this team that you like from last season probably won't be here in 2023-24 season, and that's just a reality.
Yeah. I mean, that's just the way it goes. I mean, we all know we've been watching basketball long enough. The team that you start with when a rebuild is probably not the team you're going to be seeing when the team finally starts to win. So. We're probably going to see some changes coming up this season, and part of that is going to be free agency. That's going to be the next big step for the Rockets is who they bring in free agency. And we all know the big names. We know the James Harden. We know the Fred VanVleets. We know the players like that a lot of people are talking about. But in this segment, we want to kind of talk about the under-the-radar type players that maybe some people may not be thinking about, but they actually may have a huge, just a big impact on the team coming up in this next season. So, Brandon, I kind of want to start with you. Who are some free agents that you're looking at that the Rockets could bring in that may not be like big splashy names, but can bring value to a team that's trying to actually finally win this season?
Man, does it not feel like the way the discourse is played out with this James Harden thing that almost every name that's not James Harden is under the radar?
Yeah,
Because
because
like
that's all we're
all of
talking
our,
about.
and I know like we're knee deep in it, so we've got other names, but it
Yeah.
feels like, and especially since the James Harden thing has been the worst kept secret for so long now, it's just
Yeah.
like, man, so it almost feels like any name that's not James Harden is sort of under the radar. I'll tell you guys, man, I'm a Seth Curry guy. I'm a Seth Curry. Like if we're
You
going
beat me to
truly, if we're
it.
truly going under the radar, not an
Yeah.
obvious name, Cam Johnson would be a name that I would say is kind of borderline obvious, maybe not so obvious. Depends on how knee deep in the weeds do you get into this. But
Yeah.
that would be kind of another name that I would be interested in at least looking at, because let's just be real about it, man. We know what the Rockets' struggles were, man. They couldn't shoot, man. They ain't had no shooters on the team.
Yeah.
Like when you arrive at a place where your best shooters are some combination of, and this is no disrespect to these guys, but your best shooters are some combination of like throughout the city. These are just guys that were on the team that were probably their best shooters. Kevin Porter Jr., Eric Gordon, and Garrison Matthews. Like
And Tari Eason.
and Tari Eason. And Tari Eason. And shout out to Tari. Like those that can't be it. We can't. That can't be what we're talking. Like they need some knockdown shooting, man. I feel like they have shot creators, shot makers, and Jabari. I know you mentioned Jabari earlier. If there was one disappointing thing about him for me was that shot didn't seem to translate the way I thought it was. Like I came into the season with some assumptions about Jabari for all of the development that we expected. That jumper was just going to be wet immediately and knockdown jumper immediately. It was not. But I do think eventually, because the form is there, the work ethic is there. Like he's got the intangibles. You figure, hey, that's going to correct itself as he develops. You figure that's going to be fine. But to the point, they don't have enough knockdown shooting. So when I look through the list of free agents, when I think of names, I start thinking about guys that can help them with the things that they just did so poorly, and that they didn't have, which was shooting. They didn't have a whole lot of shooting. They either at times couldn't defend or wouldn't defend, and at times it was a little bit of a mixture of both, an inability and a lack of willingness at times, which was disappointing. But so that's where the Cam Johnson thing comes up. You're like, okay, who can help them become a better defensive team? Who are some guys that can knock down shots, and what are the names that stick out? Those are two that kind of stick out to me off top. I know we're watching the playoffs right now. We're going to talk about the playoffs, I'm sure, at some point. Max Strus is a name that comes to mind when I'm just talking about guys who can knock down shots, and we're talking about under the radar or underrated, not like a frontline guy. Those are some names that kind of stand out to me. Obviously, we've addressed, and hopefully they address, the point guard situation. When we were talking about the draft and the Thompson twin, I was also thinking about how if they were to get a point guard, whether in the draft or free agency, how that could make Kevin Porter Jr. so much better, because I think there's just so much potential there if he's not miscast the way he is, if he's put in a role that allows him to really be Kevin Porter Jr. I used to always say this, man, we were having like in the heart of this discussion, like before he was for sure their full-time point guard, and we're like, hey, can he be a point guard kind of thing? I'm like, man, can he just be Kevin Porter Jr.?
Thank you.
Can he just be? Can we not try to like square peg round hole this guy and like just let him be whatever he is? So I think getting a point guard would allow them to do that. So those are the ways that I kind of think about it. Like shooters, guys who can defend. Seth Curry doesn't actually fit that description. He's more of just kind of the knockdown shooter type. But Strus, Curry, and of course Cam Johnson are the names that kind of stick out to me. And there are of course plenty of others, but those are the few that I give you here.
Yeah, and you kind of stole one of my people that I was going to throw out there, because Seth Curry is the exact type of person the Rockets need. They need a specialist. They need somebody that can come in. He shot 40% his entire career. It has been a season where he shot under 40% from three. He's not going to be a type of person that needs the ball in his hand all the time. He's going to be there for shooting. And when you're the worst shooting team in the league, And the Rockets got to the point where they just stopped even shooting threes. And we know that's a recipe for disaster in today's NBA, is when you're only shooting 23s a game. That's not going to work, especially when you're not a good defensive team on top of that. That kind of just led to the Rockets just having trouble even scoring on the offensive end a lot of nights. So, yeah, Seth Curry is a great name, and that's exactly one of the names I was going to throw out there. Before I get into my list, I want to let Vader kind of give some names that he was thinking of.
I want to start with a name that I don't want. Like I was looking at the list and I'm like, and some people may disagree, but like, I don't want Dylan Brooks here. And the reason why is because like he can't shoot, right? So like we talked about like some of our, and I've seen like on Twitter, some people were saying like he's gonna be like Patrick Beverly 2.0. Patrick Beverly could shoot 3-pointers when he was here. Like I don't know if y'all remember that or not, but like one of the things that got Patrick Beverly on the floor over Jeremy Lin was the fact that he was a more consistent 3-point shooter and he defended. You're bringing in a Dylan Brooks who is an inconsistent 3-point shooter, and then he brings all this other like weird stuff with him. Like we don't need that. We got enough problems already. People complaining about Jalen Green painting his fingernails. They complaining about
the
Kevin
cultures.
Yeah, like
we don't need that. No.
I do not want this dude on the team, man. Like I respect his hustle. Like I'm never gonna knock anybody's hustle. Like he's able to stay in the NBA by being like this antagonist, by being this irritant. And yeah, I think every championship team needs kind of like a guy who can come in and kind of like get under other people's skin or at least defend. Like the Sixers have PJ Tucker, and PJ Tucker doesn't like fit that mold as far as like being like getting under people's skin, but he's just a hard nosed guy. And that's kind of, to me, that's what we need. We need a hard nosed guy. I don't need all like the antics and all the like, theatrics and stuff that Dylan Brooks brings, the media quotes and the sound bites. And like all he's doing is putting stuff on other teams' chalkboards. And we don't need that. Like I said, we have enough issues right now. Apparently other people around the NBA think that we are worse off than teams who have been historically worse than we have been, like, which is crazy. Like I saw something today where they were saying like people around the league think that Wembanyama would be better off in places other than Houston. And when you look at the other top teams and the other teams in the lottery who have a realistic shot of getting him, you're talking about who? Like the Charlotte Hornets. Who, like, do we need to talk about Bridges? Do we need to talk about some of the stuff we've seen on social media, like with Bridges and even LaMelo? Like, let's be serious. And then who else? Detroit Pistons. They've had like one winning season in how many years? It's been like over a decade. Like they have not been a good basketball team. We're talking about the Spurs, who just had a controversy with the player who they drafted in the lottery that they had to cut. But the Rockets, for some reason, are being held to this standard and held up as like this is the most dysfunctional franchise in the NBA, and I just think that is completely unfair. So yeah, I don't like that. So yeah, as far as like free agents now, like Dylan Brooks, like I wish him best of luck wherever he goes, but like I don't want him on the Rockets. And then I looked down the list and I saw guys that look good on paper, but they have other issues like injury concerns. And I mean, you have your Chris Middletons, who is a good player. You have your Kristaps Porzingis, who would be awesome here if he was healthy, but he can't stay healthy. You have Kyrie Irving, who comes with Kyrie Irving baggage. So like, I think some sneaky under the radar like pickups, like a guy like Brook Lopez. Like Brook Lopez could anchor our defense. Like he'd give us like a change of he'd give us a different look defensively. Like that guy he transformed his career. Like when he first came in, he was known as this like offensive guy, right? And now he's and he was kind of known as a post scorer, and now he's he shoots threes and he plays defense. And I think he would be a good fit, short term fit here. Obviously you wouldn't offer him a long term contract. I do think, Lachard, we do have to overpay guys just because definitely. They're not going to come here. Like if somebody offers this guy $20 million and we offer him $20 million, like he's going to probably go somewhere else just because where we are in the phase of the rebuild. So I do think you're going to have to overpay guys, but I think that's okay as long as the contracts are like 2 years, 1 year, 2 years, maybe, I think when you get to 3, you might be pushing a little. But I like Brook Lopez. Jacob Pertl, I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly. You know, those foreign names.
Jakob Pertl.
Jakob Pertl. Yeah, Jakob.
Yeah.
Jakob. That was a song.
Got him.
Yeah. Some of y'all might
Jakob.
know that's a song. But
that's what. That's also what we used to say if if you hit a jump shot.
Yeah.
Jakob.
Brandon knows. Yeah, you cross somebody and you hit that thing. Jakob.
I J somebody, but I remember though back in the day.
Just on the strength of that name alone, like I want to move Jakob up to top 5 on the free agency list. Let's bring him in just so we can do that. But like he's a guy who like he went to the Raptors and he helped him a lot. Like I think he would do a lot of good
starting.
Things. Yeah, he do a lot of good things on this team. I'm not big on paying Fred VanVleet the max. I know some guys like that idea. I'd rather like if we're gonna bring in a vet. We're gonna bring in a vet point guard. Like I'm okay with that, but like I don't want to. Like I think because he does have these big games in playoffs at times, and he has shown like he's a gamer. I think people think Fred VanVleet is somebody that he isn't. Like if you like really dig into like his statistics and as far as like what he does, I think people think that he's like this pure point guard who's gonna get to the basket and finish at the rim, and he's not that. He's not that at all. So like for me, like Cam Johnson obviously fits a need as far as like being an outside shooter, being able to be like a 3-and-D wing. So like for me, like Lopez, Cam Johnson, Jakob Pertl, those are some guys to me that like come to mind as far as like just filling needs that we need because we got to get better defensively. We have to get better at shooting threes. We were the worst 3-point shooting team in the NBA this season. And like you're not gonna win any basketball games in the NBA when you can't shoot threes. So like you said, Seth Curry would be a sneaky pickup, and I think he's a guy that's attainable. You can actually get him.
Yeah, and y'all both actually that's another name that I had on my list was Pertl. He's a legitimate 7-footer, something the Rockets need. They don't have size on this team at all. Yes, I know they have Boban, but I mean somebody actually is going to play legitimate minutes. They don't have enough size on this team. Even though they were a much better rebounding team, probably the best rebounding team in the league this year, it was a lot of times where teams would just get into the paint and be able to easily score against the Rockets because they just did not have that size inside. So someone like Pertl would be perfect. I don't think you would have to break the bank to bring him over. Now it'd be a matter of whether he'd be willing to come off the bench because you're either going to have Şengün here, or if Şengün's not here, it's probably because you have Victor Wembanyama and you decided, well, Şengün would probably have to move on from him because he's not going to want to come off the bench. But either way, you're going to have one of those two guys here. So it'd be a matter of would a Brook Lopez want to come off the bench? Would a Pertl want to come off the bench? But that's definitely the type of player I think the Rockets need to be going after. Another one was Naz Reid. He's probably one of the best backup centers in the league as far as on the offensive end. He doesn't give you a lot on the defensive end, so that's kind of why I'm a little bit hesitant on bringing him over. But as far as offensively, there's not a lot of much better players at the center position when it comes to scoring, like Naz Reid. Another guy that I think is actually what Dylan Brooks think he is Josh Hart. Even though he did struggle a little bit in the playoffs, I think he's the type of player that would fit perfectly on the Rockets. He's hard-nosed. He's not always, like you were saying with Dylan Brooks, where he's always a lot of his, notoriety comes from his talking. It doesn't come from his playing. Even though, Josh Hart has his moments where he's like meme-worthy and stuff like that, but he's not always giving people bulletin board material. He out there playing hard. He gets a lot of offensive rebounds, probably one of the best rebounding guards in the league, plays good defense. I think that's another type of player that the Rockets could target. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to have to go and give somebody a 4 or 5 year contract and paying them $40, $50 million a year, like you would have to do with like a James Harden or a Fred VanVleet. To me, I think the Rockets are at the point now where they need to be smart. Even though they have the money, they need to be smart on who they bring in. They need to bring in I would bring in 3 or 4 players like a Josh Hart, like a Seth Curry, then trying to bring in just one big name player, and then you're using a majority of your money just on that one player. So
I'd rather like have Austin Reeves. I'd rather have Austin Reeves than Fred VanVleet, honestly.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. Because honestly, you're gonna have to pay Austin Reeves. He's making some big time money in these playoffs.
Try to pay him, but I think they're limited on what they can offer.
I don't think they're gonna be able to afford him. I don't know if he's a restricted free agent. I don't think he is. I think he actually is unrestricted free agent, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I read something, and I don't know how he's
He is
restricted, I guess, but
He's restricted. Okay, he's restricted free
but I
agent,
think they're limited on what they can offer him. So, like, if a team comes in and offers him something like above what they can pay, I think you might be able to poach him. And I think that he's a guy who has like the second half of the season, like he got to the basket a lot and he drew a lot of fouls. I saw that, and the reason I saw that is because I was looking at something as far as Jalen Green, how Jalen Green was getting to the basket and drawing fouls. Austin Reeves was right there, and so like you're talking about another guy who's can be like a foul merchant who can get to the basket. He makes winning plays. He hustles. He does a lot of the stuff that we want our guys to do, as far as like diving for loose balls, like playing, giving 110%. Like he's a guy like for me. Like if you're talking about bringing in a guy who still has some upside potential, who's still pretty young. I mean, he's older, considering when he came into the NBA. But like that's a guy who I think he can actually play basketball, and I think he would help the Rockets a lot.
Y'all saw him cook Steph Curry the other night.
Yeah. He's actually been their point guard a lot of times. LeBron, you actually see LeBron gets the rebound, and he's looking for Austin Reeves to actually bring the ball up and start the offense even more than D'Angelo Russell a lot of times. So he's actually taking over a lot of point guard roles.
You might be able to talk me into throwing a bag at Austin Reeves. Like if we're really like.
Now, what are we talking about as a bag? What are we talking about? We talking about $25 million a year?
Not that much.
What are we talking about?
Not that much. Not that much. That's
28 range.
In today's NBA, that's a bag for an Austin for Reeves like that. I mean, I'm not saying this is who he is, and I hope I'm not doing this just because he's the white guy, but like that's it's Chandler Parsons vibes. It's like, hey, they show you a flash of like, hey, what could that guy be? And it's like you give him the bag, and I'm not saying that's what he is, but the price would matter, but
Jordan Poole money, yeah.
Ooh, boy.
I mean, to me, like he's a better. This is gonna sound crazy, maybe, but like from what I've seen, like if you told me I could put either Jordan Poole or Austin Reeves on the Rockets next year at the same amount of money, I'm going to take Austin Reeves.
I'm taking Austin Reeves.
For intangibles, just from the intangibles, like I've seen, like he's a higher percentage 3-point shooter. He gets to the basket. He draws fouls. Like
better facilitator.
Jordan Poole, though. So not to go on a tangent, but Jordan Poole is just so unserious defensively.
Like, he is horrible. My God.
If you're talking about like from a Rockets context, okay, and we're specifically on the Rockets now on that. He could not. I don't care how close to Steph Curry how much he's hung out with Steph Curry over the last few years. Like he is, and especially based off of the way the Rockets would play defense at times, not all the time, but at times last year. That is just somebody who I could not welcome into this environment. Like I need the exact opposite of that. Okay, and I could at least give Austin Reeves that much credit, and that's aside from his playmaking ability, like. My God, that would be somebody that I would look at. Like if you're coming in with Jordan Poole level effort on defense, you're bringing this outfit down. You're bringing this Rockets outfit down. I did want to make this quick comparison though, since you mentioned Vader was talking about Fred VanVleet not being the guy, and there was another player that was and Lachard, you talked about Josh Hart kind of being one of y'all saying Josh Hart is a guy that I feel like. Josh Hart is the guy that Dylan Brooks thinks he is, like you said. And then I feel like Jalen Brunson is the guy that people talk about Fred VanVleet. They talk about Fred VanVleet like I'm not saying Fred VanVleet thinks he's Jalen Brunson, but the way people talk about him is like he's Jalen Brunson. So those are some parallels I thought about when y'all were talking about this.
Yeah, that's great parallels because, like I said, Dylan Brooks is more talk than anything else. Josh Hart actually goes out and performs and does what Dylan Brooks says he's going to do. And the same thing with Fred VanVleet is a good player. Don't get me wrong,
right?
But he has a lot more limitation than people like to admit to that you don't see from like a Jalen Brunson. Like Jalen Brunson, you can give him the ball and he will go out there 48 minutes. He will be the main guy. Fred VanVleet have these great games, and then next thing you look up, he's disappearing, and you don't even know where he is on the court. So, those are like two great comparisons.
Can we give Jalen Brunson some props for what he did last night? I mean, he almost like backpacked and carried the Knicks to a victory over the Heat by himself with Julius Randle and RJ Barrett deciding not to even show up and play this basketball game.
Yep.
And like I feel like last season when he was on the Mavericks, I was like, okay, Julian Brunson looks all right. I didn't know how he was going to perform with the Knicks. Like, he's exceeded my expectation. That dude is a hooper.
Yeah.
Like I'm a Jalen Brunson fan now, and I never would have thought I would have said that last season. But like he made a believer out of me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's definitely had a great playoffs up until them getting knocked out, and that's kind of what I want to finish the show is kind of talking a little bit about the playoffs. We saw the action last night. We saw the Knicks get knocked out. We saw finally the Golden State Warriors. We can finally stop hearing that the Golden State Warriors have never lost a playoff series to a Western Conference team. So I'm getting tired of hearing about that. I'm tired of hearing about that. So thank God. And that maybe we can bury the Game 6 Clay stuff, because he's been horrible the last several Game 6s, by the way. So we can probably finally bury that narrative as well. So, Brandon, what's kind of been your just overall thoughts? Have the playoffs went kind of how you thought they would, or have there been any surprises, like maybe the fact that Denver is actually a lot better than people were giving credit for?
Yeah, Denver is from a team standpoint, Denver is the one for me. Like, and I think there is legitimate reason for this, for sleeping on Denver, and it's not even Denver's fault. Like this team's fault. It's just the fact that the Nuggets. Talk about I was making fun of Jordan Poole being unserious on defense. Like, Denver, as far as being a championship contender, has, for the most part, for like most of our lives, and I know we're all somewhere between the mid-30s to into our 40s, like, for most of our lives, for the most part, they have been not a championship contender, even when they've been good. Even when they went to the Western Conference Finals a decade plus ago, like with Carmelo, like that. They have not been, like, no one thought that was a legitimate championship team for as good as they were at that time. So it's just been hard to, I think, conceive of Denver as a championship team. But if you just isolate it and take it for what it is and for what this team is, man, they are super talented on the top end, and they're deep. Like their star power is, I think, perfectly aligned when you go from Jokic, the pecking order of Jokic, perfect casting. Jokic as the main guy, the central casting figure. And then from Murray to Michael Porter Jr. and really everything that's around him from there, like, it's a good team with stars, and it's deep. It's the deepest team that's in the playoffs. And I don't think I was giving them enough credit for that, even though we saw plenty of them, right? They watched the regular season. They obviously played the Rockets. Like, We've seen Denver. We've known that they were good and everything. They were the number one seed for a reason, like Kevin Durant said when somebody asked him if he was surprised by Denver. It's like, nah, I'm not surprised. Like, we probably should not have been surprised. Probably should have given them a little bit more credit and respect on the front end, which is why I'm doing it now on the back end. Like, kind of like you were doing better just now with Jalen Brunson. I think I gave a little bit, didn't give them put enough respect on their name coming into the playoffs. So they've earned that, I feel like. And they're going to be a tough out. Like, I'm trying to picture them and like what them in that Lakers series is going to exactly look like. I think it's going to be really fun. But that's been the team. And then the player for me, man, like Devin Booker was that guy until like Phoenix. Mm-hmm. I think that's maybe the other surprise is that Phoenix would, in back-to-back years in the season, with gutless performances like that. Like, at home, that's what I'm saying. At home, season on the line, and to put up a gutless, like, embarrassing performance like that with guys with like all-time guys. I know Chris Paul didn't play, but like Kevin Durant is an all-timer. Devin Booker is like showing himself to be like, I think, one of the better players of his generation, which is a much younger generation than what we're talking about. I think with Kevin Durant, we're like talking about the next generation of players. He's going to be like, among the elite of those guys, So like to end the season like that, man, for a second straight year, that part surprised me. I don't know how I'm going to look at Phoenix the same when the playoffs come next year. I don't know how I'm going to be able to unsee 2 years in a row, even if they do have guys like Kevin Durant and Devin Booker on the team. But player wise, to get back to my point, was Jimmy Butler, man. Jimmy Butler, like the Jimmy Butler story. The
Tom Ball, Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, Tom Ball zone, and shout out to Tom Ball, the North Side, and everybody, all of y'all out there, man. Like, Jimmy Butler, the Miami Heat as a test. So Jimmy Butler as a testament to like hard work, perseverance, getting it out of the mud, and far more talented than probably he was ever given credit for until recently.
Yeah.
And then the Miami Heat as an organization, which we know that they are a world-class organization. They've been for a long time, but here's another display. Here's another exhibit, if you will, of the Miami Heat as an organization. And this is not to like stroke the Miami Heat too much, but like, yo, credit where it's due. You know, as an 8 seed to be where you are, to knock off a Titan, a giant in or a Goliath type in a Giannis-led Milwaukee team, you know, and to be in this position, like I just got to give Miami all the credit in the world, and namely Jimmy Butler, who I think has been impressive. But those are the things that have stood out to me, man. It's just the playoffs overall have been compelling. I was mentioning this before we even started recording, that despite some of the injuries and despite some of the things that turn me off about the game, like unnecessary flagrant fouls, reviewing everything to see if it's a everything that looks a little dicey is a flagrant, and we gonna throw Dennis Schroeder out the game because him and Draymond Green dare to acknowledge each other's presence, and like, you know, there are things about the game that bother me and make me feel like I'm getting old real quick. But the quality of the competition, the quality of the actual players themselves is just impressed me, even as somebody that watched the regular season on a regular basis. I'm like, man, the playoffs truly is a different like kind of animal. Like, and we knew this already, but man, when you're watching it, when you're observing it, maybe even so when regular seasons are becoming more disappointing over the years, the playoffs though are still what they've always been. Like NBA playoff basketball to me has not dropped off, even with some of those pitfalls that I mentioned. So Denver, and Denver as a success story, Phoenix as a disappointment story, and obviously Miami is just kind of confirming what we already knew about them.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. Who knew about Gabe Vincent and Max Strus and Caleb Martin? And I mean, they just keep pulling these players out of nowhere that nobody's ever even heard of. And these players are going out there and performing like at the highest level. I mean, just even outside of Jimmy Butler. I mean, it's actually kind of insane how good of a coach also Eric Spoelstra is. I mean, he didn't get a lot of credit for when the big three was there, of course, because LeBron, most people figured it was LeBron and, D Wade and Chris Bosh while they was winning, but they just keep on winning regardless of who's there. And now it's Jimmy Butler. And I like you said, I don't think people still give Jimmy Butler enough credit just because, he's not a flashy type of player. He's not going out there just dunking on everybody. He's not taking 30-foot step back threes. He's just going out there and continuously winning every single season. So yeah, I mean, Miami, he's been like the biggest surprise to me. Even just because with Denver, I mean, Jokic is he's just a top 3 player in the league. So I mean, he's doing what exactly he's supposed to do. But man, Miami, they've been a huge surprise. Vader, what's been kind of your thoughts on the playoffs so far?
I'm gonna stick with Jimmy Butler right now because that's what we're talking about. But like, two things come to my mind immediately: Jimmy Butler this year and this dreadlock Jimmy Butler when he came back from the summer. I don't know what my man was doing when he put them extensions in and got the dreadlocks, but like I was like, oh. So when he came back from off season with the dreadlocks, like I was like, oh, what's going on with Jimmy Butler? But we got playoff Jimmy Butler back, man. Like he is in full effect. And so like whenever I see playoff Jimmy Butler, the other thing that comes to my mind is when he said, Tobias Harris over me. Like if you haven't seen that, because it was a shot at the Sixers because he felt like they chose Tobias Harris over him. And in retrospect, I mean that's some bad GMing right there. Like, I mean,
especially if they lose tomorrow.
Tobias Harris, he's been a good player for them, but like Jimmy Butler has been a guy who probably could have put them over the top in playoff situations. And the one time when they looked like they had an opportunity to go to the finals, if not for that Kawhi Leonard miracle shot, who was on the team? Jimmy Butler. What you about to say, Brandon?
Hey, since you mentioned that, I got to jump in. Is that the most underrated misstep in the process? Because think about that. Think about all the ways that the Sixers messed up with the process, and ultimately the process was semi a success because they did get Joel Embiid out of the mix. Okay, so you can look at it from that standpoint and say, well, they got an MVP guy, perennial All NBA type of guy, so that's great. But think about all the missteps in the process from
Joel Okafor, Nerlens Noel,
Jaleel
Markelle
Okafor,
Fultz,
Fultz, Michael Carter Williams,
Yes.
all of these cats, and like those are the ones that stand out, the draft picks. But underrated in all of that was Tobias Harris over Jimmy Butler, a part of the process that didn't even include tanking and drafting necessarily.
Yeah.
You know, it was about deciding which one of these transplants you were going to invest in, and they decided on the wrong one. Out of all of the things that they messed up in the process,
that bet on black.
Hey, that might be cheaper. That might be
the Wesley Snipes reference. Yeah.
Hey, that is it. You got to bet on black, baby.
Yeah, but yeah, man, like that was crazy. Like when you look at that in retrospect, that they kept, Tobias Harris, who is a good player in his own right, but we're talking about Jimmy Butler now.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Butler has shown the past few seasons that like he is just something like in the playoffs, he is able to elevate his game and he's able to, elevate his team. And so him being on the 76ers just makes them like, could you imagine him on the team with Embiid and Harden right now? Like it would be crazy. I think they'd be the favorite. So so like Jimmy Butler,
they could have not to interrupt you again, but they could have. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong on this, but they could conceivably have a team that has obviously Joel Embiid on it, Jimmy Butler on it, and one of those drafts that they messed up, they could have had like Jason Tatum, or maybe even Jaylen Brown too. Like
they could have had Mikal Bridges. They traded Mikal Bridges.
There we go. Yeah. That's the one that I'm forgetting about. So yeah, that's my little tangent. But
when you look back at it now, it's like, dang, the 76ers absolutely should have at least been to a finals by now. When you look at the fact that they could have had Jason Tatum, they could have had Mikal Bridges, the whole situation with Ben Simmons, just kind of the wheels falling off on that, and then the fact that you traded Jimmy Butler. Why?
Yeah. I mean, even Seth Curry, like they traded Seth Curry as part of that trade, and now they really don't have any shooting. And we saw that what happened last game with Boston. They couldn't make a shot. Nobody on the team could make a open shot. I mean, PJ Tucker, he's great at yelling at people, and I understand intangibles and stuff. But man, I mean, he's just basically out there on the offensive end, just standing. He might as well be sitting on the bench half the time because he does not do anything for the team on the offensive end. And we see teams like Boston's not even worried about guarding him. So now you have to depend on the Anthony Melton, and they even bringing in, your boy Daniel House trying to get some offense. They don't have enough people around Harden and Embiid, and when Harden is struggling like he did last game, then Embiid barely can even stay, upright. I mean, I don't know, and that's kind of where I kind of want to finish. And I want to ask you, Vader, first, like, so what's kind of your predictions tomorrow? Like, who do you have, Boston or Philadelphia?
My heart says Philly. You know what I'm saying? My heart says Philly. But like if I look at this team on paper, Boston has a better basketball team, in my opinion. I just think Boston, from the top to bottom, is just a more deep and complete team. So you're relying on Joel Embiid and James Harden to have like Herculean performances, and we know that like I don't know, like would you bet your money on that? Like I love James Harden, like but if you told me I had to bet like every penny I have in my bank account that James Harden is going to show up tomorrow and like have a at least a 30-point game, 30 points and 10 like a vintage James Harden game, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to make that bet. Like he's been so up and down this, not just this playoff series, but for his whole playoff career, right? He had that amazing game 1. He put up 2 stinkers in games 2 and 3. He had an amazing game 4. And then like game 5 was decent. And then game 6 was just like, he started off okay and then he tailed off. And so like I don't know what to expect from him. But I feel like even Jason Tatum, that last game, you saw him like play bad for 3 quarters, but he had enough intestinal fortitude and he had enough mental strength to just come out there in the 4th quarter and tune all that out and like look like the Jason Tatum that we expect him to look like the first team NBA Jason Tatum. And see, like I just don't know. So like my heart is with Philly. Like I'm gonna root for Philly. I'm gonna say Philly's gonna win. But like if I had to actually place my money down on a bet, I think Boston just has advantages over them. That
More likely, Harden 10 turnovers or Harden 35 plus points.
10 is a lot.
10 is a lot. No, I'm gonna go with 35.
Okay, I would say 7 plus turnovers, or he's gonna have 35 points, or maybe he'll have both because he's done both of that before.
Yeah, that would be an interesting bet.
Tomorrow's gonna be that game 7 tomorrow though. Like that is gonna
that's
be
a legacy game, man. Let's be honest. That's a legacy game.
Whatever I have to do tomorrow, I'm like clearing my schedule.
Is something happening tomorrow? I don't know about.
Nothing.
Some special day or something.
There's only one game. Like if I have to go to somebody's birthday party, I'm sorry, I won't be there. Like whatever it is. Oh, it's Mother's Day. Oh well, Mom.
Hey, and why am I sitting up here with a mother and mother to my children thinking like, what is tomorrow? What they talking about? Like,
we just joking. If they tune in, like we knew what tomorrow was all along.
I'm gonna have to edit that part out. Yeah. So my wife, you don't hear that part.
Dump that part. Dump that. Yeah. No,
but like whatever is happening, like we're gonna have to reschedule because I'm not missing that game. I'm sorry. And then and the we can't end the pod like the Golden State Warriors are dead. Like we got to talk about that. And we did not mention that Draymond Green is also a free agent. I don't know.
Oh, he's gone.
Oh man,
I don't want him here, but he's gone. Yeah. He's not coming back to Golden State. I don't see. I mean, sure they can throw some money at him, but I don't think Golden State wants to throw money at him. I think they're perfectly fine with Draymond. I think at this point the negatives outweigh the positives when it comes to Draymond Green. I mean, if they can get rid of the podcast by itself, that's a win for Golden State just by itself. So just forget about all the other stuff that he does.
You know what? Hey, this might be a hot take. But I would almost be more interested in Draymond Green just go full on podcast. I don't really got to watch Draymond Green play basketball.
Oh, man. Can you imagine the stuff he would say?
Just the entertainment. Like I don't necessarily got to agree with anything he say.
And it's not talked about enough. But Golden State really fumbled those draft picks. They had the second pick in the draft, and they drafted Wiseman. Yeah, and they had that
Kuminga.
pick. And they drafted Kuminga. Like. You could have had, I mean, people do this all the time as far as like, redrafts and all of that, but like, could have had LaMelo Ball, you could have had Franz Wagner, you could have had Josh Giddey. Like, these are guys that actually fit the way that they play, their play style. And you could have had those guys, and you still could have extended your dynasty out a few more seasons. And now, they ended up trading Wiseman for Gary Payton, the second, which is crazy. And then, Kuminga doesn't play. So those are some things that just kind of get, glossed over, but they kind of screwed those two draft picks up.
It's going to look a lot worse now that Steph Curry and Klay Thompson is getting older. I think Klay Thompson, the days of him being a top shooting guard to me are over with. I mean, he can still be a good player, but he's not anywhere near the level that he used to be at. And then, Steph Curry is Steph Curry, but at some point, he's just like anybody. He's going to get older and he's going to be, phasing himself out of the league. And now you fumble, like you said, to Kuminga. Maybe Kuminga gets better, but right now I haven't really seen anything from Kuminga. Make me like, oh, yeah, Moses Moody is a decent player, but not like I'm sitting like, oh, he's going to take the next step. And then you gave all that money to Jordan Poole. So now you're tied to Jordan Poole. Now, who's going to trade for Jordan Poole at this point if you're trying to trade him? And Wiggins is a good player, but who's to say Wiggins is still going to be around? So Golden State finally may be on their way down, even though we've said this before, and maybe they pull off some miracle trade and bring in another Kevin Durant type player, which would be just insane. But at this point, like you said, they've made a lot more mistakes than they have made in the last several years, probably in the last couple of years combined. So I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm perfectly fine with Golden State going down finally.
Hey, so before I go off on the Golden State thing, I wanted to go back real quick and just on the Philly Boston thing. Yeah. My hang up. The reason why I'm struggling with Game 7 and predicting it is because of the way both teams lost their most recent losses. Like the way Boston lost in Game 5 and the way Philly lost at the way they played at the end in both of those games in 5 and 6 made me feel bad about both teams going into the next game. So like in game 6, I'm like, hey, you know, the way Boston ended that last game, Philly is closing this thing out. And then Philly comes out of the like, man, they kind of quit there in the last, feel like 3 minutes of the game. It felt like
stop playing.
They put a Cam Newton when he fumbled that ball in the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
Just looked at it. Yeah.
Exactly. So like my and I'm gonna get back to Golden State, but like just to wrap that up, my take on it is just I don't really feel confident or good about either team. I know somebody has to win it, but based off of those two performances, it's hard to feel good about either one of those teams, which is what is going to make, to me, the East really interesting, because there's going to be, you know, an 8 seed and a team that you kind of know is really good, but wonder about how they play sometimes or how they finish games sometimes. So that's kind of my thing with that series. But I would just echo the point that y'all are making about Golden State, and I think it's a kind of a big deal because they had an opportunity here to really retool and like kind of not miss a beat, to kind of transition into a new phase of the Golden State era or dynasty or however you want to characterize it, and a new phase that would still include Steph Curry. Like I think the players that are cooked are Klay Thompson. He's just not the same guy anymore. And then Draymond is just somebody that, I mean, you could stand to move on from just anyway, you know, as you kind of move on into this next phase. And I think that whole, like, I don't want to make too big of a deal about it, but I also don't want to minimize it. The whole Jordan Poole punch thing, like I feel like that mattered more than maybe we wanted to actually acknowledge at the time. Kind of wanted to be like, well, guys get into fights and practice all the time, and this is just how locker rooms work and it's sports and yada yada yada. But my sense was that was a little bit more foul than anybody could ever, like, more than what you could justify.
And Jordan Poole wasn't the same after that, and you can see even his demeanor on the sideline, on the bench, it's different than what it was last season.
Yeah, and I think that really mattered in how that kind of fractured the team, and kind of speaking to the point of this transition phase that they had an opportunity to take. There seemed to be, and I've listened to a little bit of radio in the Bay Area too, to kind of get a beat for how they feel about all of this. There seems to be kind of a legitimate divide. I don't know if it's like just straight up static, like, you know, punching Jordan Poole in the face type of stuff, but there seems to be a clear divide in the legacy guys, the established guys that we know about, you know, the Stephs, Clays, Draymonds, and these younger guys, up and comers. The age gap and the reputation gap, like it's real, just like more than just surface level within that locker room and kind of how they operate. So I mean, I think that they have an issue of maybe did they pick the wrong guys, and then also like the trust level. Like I think they could have stood, and I don't know, Lachard, you said you didn't see much out of Kuminga, but I would have been curious to see him play more, you know, and maybe that speaks to his readiness, and maybe they didn't think he should play more. But I mean, he's gotten buckets for them at times. You know, they've relied on those young guys at different points during this season when they had to, you know, and to see that when you got to the playoffs, they didn't seem to have the faith in a Jonathan Kuminga. You know, I think he was complaining about his minutes even at some point with local media. Moses Moody, you know, maybe not a great player, but, you know, I wonder if both things, if they pick the right guys and if they even have the right kind of faith to invest in their young guys, you know, show some kind of level of faith in them. I would have liked to have seen more of them in the series, to be honest with you. Like, they had this commitment to Dante DiVincenzo and, you know, guys like that. And I know Dante DiVincenzo is a good player. I think he's going to might even be a free agent. You know, we're talking about free agents.
Yeah, he is.
And a champion and all of that. But I would have liked to see more of these young guys that actually get a better feel. Like, I don't really feel like I can give you a good feel for what those guys are, because I didn't, particularly in the playoffs, because I didn't see enough of them.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree. And honestly, at the end of the day, it's just good not to have to keep talking about Golden State in the playoffs anymore. I have to see their faces. You know, objectivity out the window. I'm sorry. I'm just so tired of seeing a Golden State.
It's a parade inside my city.
Hey, I was watching them in the. I stopped at the gas station last night. I had it up on my phone, and it was actually still. It was actually still the earlier game. So it was Knicks Heat actually that I was watching. But a guy was kind of standing in line with me, looking kind of over my phone. He was asking about the score, and then he started asking me who I was going for. And I said, man, I'm a Rockets fan. Only thing I'm rooting for in this playoffs is for Golden State to go home as soon as possible.
Yes.
and just as a basketball fan who's got a little bit of, not as a hater, because I can appreciate their place in the game, and somebody that loves basketball, loves the NBA, can like respect their place in history. But like in the moment, right now, the fatigue and and obviously the Rockets connection, I'm like, yo, go ahead and get them up out of here.
No, but Brandon, I'm gonna tell you what when they went off the rails for me. Like I didn't hate them. Like I didn't like them because they were our rival. But when they brought Kevin Durant in, that was the divide for me. That's when I was just like, okay, like because you add the second best player in the NBA to a 73 win basketball team. Like no, like I was not okay with that.
Me neither. I had more of a problem with Kevin Durant for it at the time. Now I'm much more forgiving of that now than I was at the time. I would have agreed with you more when it happened, but this is why I've changed my mind on that a little bit. Because I guess knew this at the time, but when I reflect on it, man, that is more of a credit to LeBron. Like they were everything that you just said that they were. How many games? 72. They won 72 games. 73 games.
Yeah.
They won all them games. They were the best regular season team that we had ever seen. They were, if not the best, certainly probably the best shooting team that we had ever seen. Had all of these things going for them. Had won a championship 2 years before, but they needed the second best player on their team to combat the fact that they kept running into at the time the best player in the game. So, like, I'm not saying that I respect it because I don't. I would more so agree with you there, but I definitely understood it. I'm like, man, they looking over like, man, we got the best team that y'all never seen, and this dude over here didn't pulled together, dusted off Kevin Love from Minnesota and figured out a way to get Kyrie to act right, and got him a championship. Josh Smith, J.R. Smith, and making this happen. Like, okay. We got to go get Kevin Durant, a dude who, by the way, we just beat. A dude we just beat and overcame the 3-1 deficit. We got to go get that guy just to overcome what LeBron is bringing to the table. So, but I definitely understand that, and
that's another reason why I don't hold LeBron's championships completely. Like a lot of people are like, okay, he only won, what is it, 4?
Only 4, yeah.
And he's lost this many. And
he only been to the finals 10 times in a row.
Yeah, so like people hold his losses against him, his finals losses, and I'm like, these other teams was literally like forming like super mega teams to
every single one of them. Boston, Golden State, all these teams were forming super teams just to beat LeBron. And I'm not a huge LeBron fan on the court, but I can see his greatness a lot more than most people do. And like you said, I mean, they went and basically cried and begged Kevin Durant to come over there after winning 73 games because they were that scared of LeBron James.
They kicked Harrison Barnes to the curb.
They did. They act like he
wasn't even on the team.
Yeah, it's like he never existed. And he was a team player. He was invested in the community. He was like a kind of a stand-up dude, kind of like out there. And they acted like Harrison Barnes never existed, all because of LeBron. Like this is not to do too much stroking of LeBron, but the reality of it is the way he dominated the Eastern Conference before he went to the Lakers, they could have renamed the Eastern Conference. Just call it LeBron. Like Team LeBron. Call the Eastern Conference the same thing you call his little all-star teams now that they're doing the all-star captain thing. Like it was the LeBron conference for a stretch, for an era, basically.
They called him LeBronto in Toronto.
Yeah.
For the longest.
If he beats Denver the way they're playing right now, I think I don't know, man. I'm gonna have another level of respect because to me, I know a lot of people are pointing to the fact that like the Lakers have been a good matchup for Denver this season, but like Jokic and you talked about it a little bit earlier or before you even got on that, like I don't even understand how Nikola Jokic does the things that he does, man. Like. Yep. He's this guy. He doesn't look, overpowering as far as like a physical specimen. Yeah, he's big. Yeah, he's tall, but he doesn't seem overly athletic. He barely jumps. He's just out there, and he's like just thinking the game at a different level than everybody else. and his anticipatory skills, his reflexes, the way he's able to see things happen before they actually happen, and it's just pretty amazing. Like, he just goes out there and he'll casually drop a 30, 15, and 15 on you, and you look at the box score and you're like, man, this man just like he's out here going crazy, putting up Wilt Chamberlain numbers. And so, like, to me, like, if LeBron and AD can go and take out Denver, like, I think this would be one of his better accomplishments, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's going to be, very interesting playoffs, even beyond tomorrow. So, I mean, one way or another, we're going to have a new champion this year because Golden State is knocked out. So we will definitely see how that plays out.
Celebrate. We can start celebrating early then.
And Tuesday, don't forget about Tuesday.
And next week is going to be that's the Rockets, quote unquote Super Bowl. It's next week. Their NBA Finals is going to be next Tuesday. So we will definitely be back for a post draft lottery show. We'll be definitely having some interesting things to say about that. But before we go, I want to definitely thank Brandon for coming on. It was a great conversation. We'll definitely have you back on at some point this off season because, as much as we think there's a lot to talk about, there's going to be a lot of off time in between now and the season. So we're definitely going to have you back on the show. We appreciate you coming on.
Man, it's a pleasure, man. I love doing this, man. I could talk to y'all.
Yes.
Like this flew by. Could do it plenty more, man. So thank y'all for having me, man. And I'll do it anytime.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. We can talk for 2 or 3 hours and, but they probably won't be watching 2-3 hours of a podcast, unfortunately. But I could just keep talking for hours and hours. Exactly. But we will definitely have you back on as usual, Vader. I appreciate you coming on and joining me every week.
Oh, so, so like, I just want to say, like, whoever you pray to him. If you got some like lucky draws, put them on. You got like
your lucky bobblehead.
Yeah, lucky bobblehead, rabbit's foot, like whatever it takes. Like, we got to do whatever it takes, man. We need a top 2 pick in this draft.
Yeah.
I think the narrative around the NBA, around the league, will change a lot if the Rockets were to secure either Scoot Henderson or Victor Wembanyama. So like, let's speak that into existence on Tuesday.
Yeah, man. So much riding on it, man.
Absolutely, man. And like I said, I appreciate everybody that joins us every week, that checks out our YouTube page, that checks us out on Twitter, Reddit, wherever you check out our content. We appreciate everybody that comes on, gives us likes. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel because, like I said, we're going to be having some big things coming up, whether it's press conferences at Toyota Center, whether it's interviews with potential draft picks during the draft combine. We're going to be having a lot of exclusive content on our YouTube page, so make sure you're checking out our YouTube page, and we appreciate all the support. And make sure you check us out for our next episode of Rocket Fuel Podcast.